Some movies do not just capture a moment in time, they actually end up becoming the moment. Fast Times at Ridgemont High hit theaters in the summer of 1982, written by Cameron Crowe. He spent a year undercover in a real San Diego high school. What came out felt less like a movie and more like a confession. It was funny, brutally honest, and devastating in ways teen comedies. It launched a cast whose real lives turned out to be just as wild as anything happening inside hallways. Here is where they are today. During the entire shoot scene, Penn refused to answer to his own name. His dressing room door said Jeff Spicoli, and if you called out for scene, you got zero response. He was 21 and already operating with a level of commitment that made everyone around him comfortable but totally riveted. Spicoli ordering a pizza to Mr. Hand's classroom, because it is our time, became a legendary movie character. But Penn played him with something deeply real underneath, a refusal to be put down that went way beyond the joke. His friction with Mr. Hand was real. Penn deliberately annoyed Ray Walston off camera, calling him Hand between takes to keep the real anger going. Director Amy Heckerling later confirmed the van smoking scene used real weed. Penn even wrecking Camaro himself, without a stuntman. He later won 2 Oscars for Mystic River and Milk, but he also served 33 days in jail. Conducted a secret interview with fugitive drug lord El Chapo that sparked a federal investigation, and spent years doing humanitarian work in disaster zones. At 65, he attended the 2026 Golden Globes with Moldovan actress Valir Nakov. Still came the same raw intensity he had at 21. The woman behind the most famous scene in Fast Times had a completely different story waiting after she toughed that red cunny. Ask anyone who saw Fast Times in a theater back in 1982 what they remember most. And what they remember most, and they almost always say the pool. Phoebe Cates stepping out of the water as Linda Barrett in that red bikini while Moving in Stereo played on the soundtrack. She was 18 and terrified the neighbors on the neighborly hills were watching through binoculars. She later described the scene not as sexy, but as a big Joe Jacabratas expense. Linda was the mature friend giving relationship advice that sounded wise but usually was not. Cates played her with a sharp, dry wit that so looked gets overlooked as a kitey. She got into acting after modeling, a job she openly hated and only did for the cash. After Gremlins and Drop Dead Fred, she was right on the edge of massive stardom. But in 1994, she chose to walk away completely. She married actor Kevin Kline in 1989. And decided her kids needed her around. In 2005, she opened a boutique named Blue Tree on Madison Avenue, and you can often find her working the floor herself, totally ignoring her movie fame. The store is still open today in June 2026, and she and Kline have been married 37 years. Meanwhile, the guy on the other side of that bathroom door had a much rougher time with his fame. The downfall of Brad Hamilton is easily the funniest slow-motion disaster in Fast Times. Judge Reinhold, who was 24 at the time, almost walked the movie over one specific scene. He starts the movie as the cool senior who has everything and ends up in a convenience store wearing a pirate hat. He later called filming that infamous bathroom fantasy sequence the bravest thing he had ever done. During one done take, he brought in a prop so wildly inappropriate that the whole crew lost it, though it was cut from Lost It. Beverly Hills Cop made him a massive star, and the Santa Claus franchise kept him on screens. Later, his hilarious recurring role on Seinfeld as the close talker introduced him to a whole new generation of fans. He has been very honest about the years when studio politics buried his career and typecast him Mocastic Man. A 2016 arrest at Delafield after a clash with airport security briefly headlines, but the charges were quickly dropped. Today he lives in Little Rock with his wife Amy Miller and their daughter Haley at 69. Some distance from Hollywood suits him, plus Beverly Hills Cop XF became a massive Netflix F22D4. The school football star, who gave the movie its most physical performance, had a completely different path waiting for him. The iconic scene defining Charles Jefferson has almost zero dialogue. Spicoli convinces him that players from the rival school trashed his car before the big game. Forrest Whitaker himself delivers the build-up, that quiet stillness before the explosion. Entirely with his body, only 20, he came to Hollywood on an opera scholarship, studying classical voice instead of acting. To play Jefferson, he had to quickly rebuild weight lost on another project, constantly eating to look like a real linebacker. Director Amy Heckerling immediately noticed his presence. After his audition, she caught him skipping across the Universal lot in pure joy and loved it to write into the script. His subsequent career defies any simple summary. The Last King of Scotland scored him the Best Atom 2006, Black Panther, Rogue One, UNESCO Special Envoy for Peace, and a black belt in Kenpo Karate. Married to Keisha Nash for 25 years, they split in 2021. She passed away in 2003. 4 children, and a deep grief the press has mostly left alone. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2026 Joy Awards in Riyadh, an honor that fit him perfectly. Another cast member, who barely registered on screen that summer, had an even more winding path to fame. He appears in Fast Times at Ridgemont High for maybe 30 seconds, says almost nothing, and is nothing. Credits as Nicolas Coppola. He was 17, the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, and minor labor laws kept from a bigger role. He actually auditioned for the role of Brad Hamilton and was seriously considered, but then someone checked his birth certificate. What went down on that set explains. One of Hollywood's strangest main changes, the crew spent the entire shoot teasing him with variations of the most famous line from Apocalypse Now. He later called it crippling, that unique humiliation of only being seen as a shadow of someone's Zeus. Right after Fast Times, he changed his last name, inspired by Marvel's Luke Cage and composer Cage, and enter in additions as someone entirely new. Birdie Raising Arizona, Moonstruck, Leaving Las Vegas won him the Oscar in 1995. A legendary career that eventually collapsed under Castles, A Dinosaur Skull, and Enough Is Debt to force it of non-stop work. Married 5 times, most recently to Rico Shibata since 2021, welcoming daughter Augustica in 22. In May 2026, he starred in Spider Noir on Amazon Prime. Yet, the most commanding presence in those Ridgemont High classrooms built a totally different Amon career. There are teachers in teen movies, and then there is Mirror Hand. Ray Walston delivered each line with the exhausted authority of a man single-handedly defending us the slow decline of civilization. The comedy landed perfectly because he played it completely straight, never once winking at the audience. He was 67 on set, having already lived through 3 full careers before Ridgemont High came along. Broadway came first, earning a Tony for Damn Yankees in the 1950s. He played the devil with such menace that his pivot to lovable alien Uncle Martin in My Favortion shocked everyone. 3 seasons. He became a household name. After a long middle stretch came Fast Times, followed by an incredible late summers for picket fences witnesses in the 1990s. Off-screen, Walston enjoyed a quiet steadiness his welder characters never had. He married Ruth Calvert in 1943, remaining together until his death 57 years later. Lupus struck in 1994. He fought it 6 years, dying on New Year's Day 2000. 1A26. Retrospectives of 1980s cinema still regularly spotlight Mirror Hand, one of those barely visible faces in Spicoli, as Smokey Van made a quiet entrance to the film, but had a much end to the film. In fact, Anthony Edwards' entire contribution to Fast Times at Ridgemont High is just 2 words: let's party. He was 20, a stoner sidekick riding in the back seat with an unknown actor, Eric Stoltz. They bonded on set, lived together afterward, and made a pact to boost each other's careers. Both kept it. Top Gun in 1986 redefined his fame. His portrayal of Goose, warm and devastatingly tragic, became a defining supporting performance of Dudgy. Then came her, pulling 15 million viewers a week, and Drrr, Mark Green over 8 seasons, a role of such deep decency under pressure that it defined a generation. At his peak, he was the highest paid actor on American TV. He married Jeanine Lobel in 1994, had 4 kids and split in 2015. In E1, he and actress Mare Winningham, friends for 35 years, quietly alone. In 2017, he published an essay detailing the abuse he suffered from a producer early career, making him one of the first men to speak out as a survivor before the bigger reckoning hit. Today he is 63, directing Law and Order episodes in 2026, several featuring Stoltz. The movie As Smoothest Operator was running a very different game, and his real life was almost the exact opposite cool. Mike Damone totally owns every room he walks into in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Robert Romanus spent the whole shoot convinced he wasn't cool enough to play him. The disconnect is almost impossible to imagine now. The slick-ticket scalper whose five-point dating plan became a complete Bible for fans, and who cowardly walked away from Stacey Hamilton after she got pregnant. Romanus was 25 during filming, quiet and artistic, always feeling kind of overshadowed by actors around him. He is of Lebanese descent, and the younger brother of Mean Streets actor Richard Romanus. After Fast Times, he landed steady work on The Facts of Life as Snake, but that massive breakout on never actually came. He shifted to music, releasing albums and teaching guitar, then opened Bob's Espresso Bar in North Hollywood, a popular neighborhood spot that eventually shut down. His marriage to Carrie Lizer, creator of The New Adventures of Old Christine, ended in divorce. They share 3 kids. Today he is 69, a regular at 80s conventions, often hanging out with Brian Backer. And in January 2026, he joined the cast of the horror comedy Lost Media. Look, the girlfriend who started Brad Hamilton's Downward Spiral had a career that went down unexpected. Brad Hamilton never saw it coming, and neither did the audience. Lisa, his bubbly girlfriend in the movie, walks away from him with almost zero drama, and Amanda Wyss delivered that breakup with a cold, matter-of-fact calm that really made it sting. She was 21 then, and what came after her time at Ridgemont would make Brad's bad look pretty easy. 2 years later, she played Tina Gray in A Nightmare on Elm Street, becoming Freddy Krueger's first victim. It was a death scene so technically intense that film schools still study it today. She handled her own stunts for that iconic ceiling scene, filmed inside a custom rotating room built just for her. That role gave her a cult following that has only grown over 40 years. She kept working steadily, appearing in Highlander, the television series CSI, and a bunch of horror movies that kept her close to the genre fans. In November 2024, she married actor Stephen Caffrey, a sweet romance celebrated by fans who love the 40 years. Today she is 65, still a huge draw at horror conventions, and recently starred in the Indie Ed. Meanwhile, the other stoner buddy in Spicoli, Svan, was quietly building his own massive legacy while everyone else moved on. Eric Stoltz was actually cast as Marty McFly in Back to the Future, shooting for 5 weeks right after his silent role in Span, before in Spicoli's van, replaced by Michael Jacks Fox because the directors thought acting was too intense and not fun. He barely mentioned that humiliation for decades. When he finally opened up in the 2020s, he said it pushed him toward darker, heavier roles like Mask, which got him a Golden Globe nomination back in 1985, and Pulp Fiction. He built a solid indie reputation, choosing raw acting over easy charm, and earned that lasted any box office hype. His tight bond with Anthony Edwards, made during Fast Times, survived both of their rises. They still work together, with Stoltz directing Edwards in recent Law & Order episodes. He married Worley in 2005, and they have a daughter. Before that, he dated Bridget Fonda and his former co-star Jennifer Jason Leigh. Then, in April 2026, a rare public appearance shocked fans with his transformed look. He was silver-bearded and quietly commanding, almost unrecognizable from that red-haired kid in Venom. Meanwhile, the cheerleader bouncing through those halls with non-stop energy was hiding a very differing of her palms. Cindy, the energetic spirit bunny cheerleader in the film, is the movie's perfect comic relief, constantly cheering while everyone else is totally bored. Kelly Maroney played that extreme positivity as a deliberate choice, making Cindy so aggressively happy that it felt kind of crazy. She was 21 then, had never chewed in her life, and was basically life. She basically trained for it from scratch. Then, 1984's Night of the Comet and 1986's Chopping Mall took her spectacle. This cemented her as a fixture in science fiction and horror, a scene that rewards loyalty in ways Streamwood almost never does. She has been open about the late 1990s, a rough stretch where she felt aged out of young roles that defined her. But then she built a convention career that kept her going for decades, and it connected her directly with the fans who kept her work alive. In 2016, she married magician Daniel Yulin, and they are regulars at Los Angeles Magic Castle. At 65, she won the 2026 Best Actress Award at the Hollywood Reel Independent Festival for Uphill-It's Death Party. The biology teacher across the hall actually lived through 3 completely different careers before ever landing at Ridgemont High. Vincent Schiavelli understood Mr. Vargas in Fast Times without ever needing to research the role. Born with Marfan syndrome, he stood 6'6" with elongated fingers and a gaunt, striking face that casting directors conned as haunted. At 33, he played that biology teacher, marching students to the morgue and discussing the Hune like someone completely at peace with death. He later joked that he was the only person on set who felt comfortable around the real cadaver use. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest had already come out before Fast Times. Amadeus and Man on the Moon came later. His extensive work with director Milos Forman gave him Fubum, the Beyond the Sad Eyes label that followed him everywhere. He married Alice Beasley in 1985, had a son and named Andrea, divorced in later Harpus Krolskin Call, Sue McCollion. During his final years, he moved back to his family village in Sicily, became a respected food writer, and published his cookbook and Beautiful Things. He passed away on December 26, 2005, at 57. His cookbook remains a cult favorite among food writers. Even in 2026, that young woman who appears briefly as one of Stacy's friends. She actually had a famous brother and a career totally outside of acting. Pamela Springsteen plays Dinah Phillips in the film, showing up as one of the cheerleaders in Stacy's inner circle. Her role was small enough that people mostly remember her as Bruce Springsteen's sister, an unfair but totally understandable reduction. Only 20 during filming, she stayed quietly observant on set, and even then, cast members noticed she watched everything way more closely than her tiny role required. For Fast Times, she took a sharp turn into horror, playing killer Angela Baker in Sleepaway Camp 2. Those specific parts built her a massive, devoted cult following in a completely different corner of culture than the one she actually grew up around. Then, in the early 1990s, she quit acting entirely. It wasn't a retreat, it was a trace photography. She took it so seriously that she ended up shooting gallery exhibitions and album covers for Rob Bunn and Bruce. In 2002, she married director Bobby Roth, having daughter Ruby. At 64, she is still shooting music photography. And in May 2026, she shot the backstage and promotional images for Bruce Springsteen's 2026 World Tour. The movie's real emotional anchor, the girl who carried every scene that wasn't a joke, was working just as hard for her recognition. Before shooting started, Jason Leigh took a job at Paris Pizza in the Sherman Oaks Galleria, working undercover 3 weeks to prepare for Stacey Hamilton in Fast Times. At Ridgemont High, she served actual customers, soaking up the quiet boredom of mall life that Stacey carries all through the film. The dedication tells you everything about Leigh. She is an actress who doesn't just fake an experience. While Spicoli got the laughs, Stacey's journey through lost innocence, a pregnancy, and an abortion, handled with quiet maturity, gave the movie its real weight. Leigh was 20, and the daughter actor Vic Morrow. Just a year after Fast Times, her dad died in a tragic accident on the set of Twilight Zone the movie. That loss, coming right as she was starting out, shadowed everything. In 2005, she married actor No Bamba. They had son Romer Emanuel and divorced in 2013, a split that partly inspired Merit Sari. She skipped the easy Brat Pack fame, choosing indie roles instead, which eventually got her an Oscar nomination for The Hateful Eight. In March 2026, she starred in the Netflix series Something Very, Very Bad Is Going to Had a Crime 101 alongside Chris Hemsworth, that sweet, nervous kid who could never quite work up the courage to ask Stacey out. He deserves the final word. Just a year before Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Brian Backer won a Tony for Woody Allen's Broadway play, The Floating Light Bulb. Meanwhile, co-stars like Paige, Whitaker were just unknown actors still finding their footing. Backer arrived as the most accomplished stage actor of the bunch. Then he played Rat Ratner, and everything Pretiner. Sweaty, sweet Mark Ratner. He was the terminally nervous kid who couldn't bring himself to ask Stacey Hamilton out, acting as a Stanley teenager who talked themselves out of what they wanted. Bakker played the role with such authenticity. The casting directors couldn't see past it. That nervous nerd persona became a narrow lane he was expected to stay in forever, and those leading to Tony Ode once suggested they simply never materialized. He showed up in Police Academy 4 and Loser, then walked away from the spotlight for good. For decades, he has lived quietly in New York, making a conscious choice to step back from everything no verified social media, and a complete absence from the reunion circuit. He is 69, and in 2026, it feels pretty fitting that the actor who played a boy too shy to speak up is now the one man nobody can seem to track down.